coming. I know you all have such busy lives and don't need another meeting to fill your day, but that's why I hope that you personally benefit from this learning collaborative. Jill, are you going to put our slides up when we can get started? All right, our agenda is here, so let's review that. Um, uh, Help us, as you usually do, by putting your name in the chat while we go over the agenda. Today, we're going to be discussing some work that we need, some updates on the National Strategy Matrix that was put together a year ago to capture some of the past activities of the lifespan respite grants. And so that those activities that align with the recommendations from the National Strategy for the Support of Family Caregivers. And of course, today we will be discussing another leadership principle as well. Our topic is going to be persuasion, power, and influence. But before all of that, Jill has some announcements and some opportunities she wants to share. So we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, I've got some pretty big announcements today. And all of this, I will be sending you, if I haven't sent them already, some of these I've already sent around emails in email form. But for those of you who get sick of all my emails and just delete them, I wanted to be sure you knew about these. The first is we're finally going to release a tool that was developed for us by the Georgetown University National Center for Cultural Competence. And this emerged from a webinar we did a couple of summers ago on this topic. And several of you asked, are there any self-assessment tools out there where we can figure out if we're ready to start talking about cultural and linguistic competence and actually developing our services to be culturally and linguistically competent? And so I went back to our presenter, Tawara Good, who's an expert in this arena, and she's been developing this tool for us. And you may recall about a year ago, she held some focus groups with diverse family caregivers, with some of you who volunteered to participate in the focus groups to help inform the development of the tool. So it's finally ready. It's a beautiful tool to help you do a self-assessment around cultural and linguistic competence, and it has a guidebook that goes with it. And we're going to release those documents at this webinar on March 21st. It'll be an overview of the tool and the guide and how to use it. And then Tawara is coming back to our grantee meeting in Albany, where we're going to dive a little deeper into the tool and have some activities. We hope that will by this time and when we have the grantee meeting, maybe you will have had a chance to try to use the tool, and we can talk a little bit more at the grantee meeting in an interactive way about using it. So that's March 21st from 1 to 2 p.m. You do need to register for that webinar, and I didn't put the link on the slide, but I will put it in the chat so you can sign up to attend that. And as always, it's recorded, so if you can't make it, it will be available in a recording. The second big announcement is that we have finally got some dates for the virtual component of our grantee meeting of the Lifespan Respite Grantee and Partner Learning Symposium. As you may recall, the Learning Symposium itself is the day before the National Lifespan Respite Conference on May 21st. But there were a few people who said, we can't travel and we really hate missing the Learning Symposium. So we decided that the part of it that we would make virtual are the bring, brag, and borrow sessions. So we plan to do that on 2 afternoons in early May, May 7th and May 8th from 1 to 4 p.m. For those of you who don't know what Bring, Brag, and Borrow is, it's a chance to share your good work with the rest of the network by either showing a product that you've developed or bragging about an event that you've held. It doesn't even have to be a formal object or event that you held. You can tell a story, you can sing a song, you can do whatever you want to share your activity. And then hopefully you'll all be borrowing from each other, hearing about something that you really like, that you'd like to replicate in your state. and seeing who it is in the state who's working on that, and then be able to, maybe if you're come to the meeting in person in Albany, you'll be able to connect with that person at the national conference. So you'll be getting a detailed instructions on how to do bring and brag and borrow. We will ask you if you're sharing something to get it to us about a week before the event so we can get everything posted. And it essentially it's a very short, rapid fire way of sharing. Every one person from each state gets 5 to 6 minutes to talk about their activity, their story, their song, their event, their video, whatever it is they're sharing. And then we'll have time to ask questions of each other about those activities. So please register for that event. It's just a Zoom link registration. It's the same Zoom link for both days. So it's a single registration form, and we hope that you'll all be able to join us for that event as well. And it'll be a good way to get ready for the conference too. And the third issue is next week we have our regular Respite Voucher Learning Collaborative. But for a reason that you'll learn about in a minute with my next announcement, we're just changing the time that I think it was originally scheduled for 1:30. We're moving it to 3 p.m. because we have a conflict with another event that I don't want you to miss if you're interested in it. But the Respite Voucher Learning Collaborative, we're going to be talking about reimbursement strategies. When we were at the Respite Summit, the State Respite Summit that the National Academy for State Health Policy held last month, the issue about reimbursing family caregivers after they've had to pay for their respite using a voucher is sometimes very prohibitive because they don't have the dollars to pay up front. So that's going to be the topic of the next Voucher Learning Collaborative, and we're going to be hearing from 3 of your colleagues with 3 different model programs to share with us how they deal with reimbursement, how their program and how their approach and implementation of their program gets around the reimbursement barrier. So that should be a very interesting learning collaborative meeting as well. Any questions about these 3 events? I know it's a lot to throw at you at once. We have so much going on. No questions? Okay. This one, I also sent this around yesterday because it's so very exciting, but ACL just awarded a few months ago a major grant, $25 million to the Alzheimer's Association in partnership with a couple of other national organizations to implement a respite program that will fund innovative models for people with dementia and their family caregivers. These are fairly sizable grants relative to our lifespan respite grant funding. So I thought it would be of great interest to all of you. The startup awards are anywhere from $50,000 to $149,000, and the pilot awards anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000. Those who are eligible include state and local governments, Indian tribal governments and organizations, faith-based and community-based groups, hospitals, and higher education institutions. So I'm very excited to see that state and local governments were eligible. ARCH does serve on the steering committee for this project. So I was very insistent that state governments be able to apply for this so that the lifespan grantees and coalitions could also participate if they had something to contribute. And the dementia models can be almost anything as long as they're working on developing some innovative aspect of a regular respite model. But you can read a lot more about it at this link. And again, I'll put the link to this in the chat. And the reason that we changed the Respite Voucher Learning Collaborative time is that they're holding an informational webinar on this funding at the same time that we would have had our Respite Voucher meeting, which seemed not a good thing to do. So we changed the time of our voucher collaborative so that if you are interested in this, you're able to attend this webinar. It's very, very exciting to see this amount of money even though it's only for one specific population, moving in the right direction for respite. Any questions about this? Okay, that's it for my announcements then, Cheryl.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, we have the national strategy matrix that we're going to be working on updating. And one of the purposes of the collaborative is to document your success in implementing respite actions that align with the national strategy. And we consider doing this by resharing the matrix and asking everyone to send us new information and examples for the matrix, or update us on the actions already included. And we are talking about doing that over the next couple of months, with the goal of being able to write a final report to ACL and the Raise Council in July, so that will update them on the lifespan respite grantees progress. So the updates are for this past year in particular, but you may have activities that are continuing or that have concluded that are not yet reflected in the matrix since it was organized. And Jill, do you want to describe what you think an update entails?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that, Cheryl. I was supposed to talk more about this. I think Cheryl covered it very well. We really want to be able to be informative to the Raise Council as they're monitoring the progress that's being made on the national strategy. And so we committed to ACL when we started this collaborative that we would assist all of you in moving the national strategy forward and then report on your progress. And for those of you who were not with us at the beginning of this collaborative, we did pull together that matrix. I'm wondering if I can pull this up on the
Pull it up for a
screen.
minute.
Are you able to see that? See the matrix
Yes.
itself?
Yeah.
Well, this is what it looked like. We had the national strategy goals. There are 5 goals, all of the outcomes under each goal. And then Megan, who was facilitating at the time, Megan Cluth, and I tried to fill in the activities that we thought you were all working on. And then at the first few months of the collaborative, you helped us fill in these activities. You added some, you made corrections. Those activities that you were already doing that are helping to advance the national strategy are things you had in the planning stages. And now we're just coming back to you now that we're 1 year past 1 year into this learning collaborative. Cheryl and I really thought it would be a good time to come in and check in with you on where you are with this. And I think what we'll do is we'll convert this into a Word document and change this last column so that you would just go in and either add the new activities that you're working on that you consider to be advancing the strategy, or updating the activities that you have that are already here, or eliminating them if they're no longer relevant. So right after this meeting, we'll send this around and give you a month or two to fill it in. And as Cheryl said, hopefully by May, if you can help us populate this document, it'll be very helpful as Cheryl prepares the final report to ACL from what we accomplished in the collaborative. Any questions about that? I think, we have populated activities in almost every goal. But even if you found that maybe your activity is not under the right goal, let us know that too. We can move things around.
Absolutely. And as if we go back to the presentation, we do have a quick polling question about the matrix and in thinking about this update. And I have a question about your confidence level in getting an update to us by May. And so, Jill, do you want to pull that up? If you'll quickly kind of, what is your confidence level? You don't anticipate any difficulty in providing an update, or your state's going to do the best to pull together an update, but it may be incomplete by the deadline. Or you're going to be extremely busy in the interim and cannot guarantee that you can meet the deadline, or you do not know if your state has the time and resources to complete an update. So confidence level just tells how sure you can be. And while lifespan respite grantees and their partners may have different approaches to providing the update, you are the champion. We need, of course, to coax your state team to provide updates. So you might have to be persuasive. So let's see.
About half the folks have responded. So why don't we give them another few seconds?
Couple of seconds.
People still voting? Okay, I think we're done.
Okay.
Oh no, there's one more person.
Oh.
See? We don't want to miss any of you. Okay, let's take a look at the results.
All right. Okay, so looks like most of you, 35% of you anyway, a third of you are going to have no problem getting it in. And others are going to be helping to get their gather their information and hopefully get some of it to us by the end of May. We do have some people who know that that's a busy grant season and that might make it difficult, or that the states don't have the resources and the time to maybe put that together. So thank you for giving that update. And we'll try to provide any assistance that we can in helping you reach that goal. But that is something we're going to be asking for. So thank you. All right. Jill, I think you can move to the next slide. Okay, so power and influence. Let's get started in our discussion on the leadership principle for today. Power is the capacity to get others to act based on positional authority that is exercised over them, and sometimes that can cause some resentment. Influence is the ability to modify how a person develops, behaves, or thinks based on relationships and persuasion. And hopefully this leads to respect. Many assume that power comes from outside in, and they see power as a position or a title, which comes with some authority or some control or some sort of supremacy over others. And others believe that real power comes from inside out, and that each individual can cultivate that by themselves. Real power is increased by simply the choices that you make, the actions you take, and the thoughts that you create. And it doesn't really matter what the organizational chart says. Power is available to everyone, no matter what their position or title. But the real power is influence, and it increases the more we offer support to others. So being powerful is more about giving support rather than getting support. And contrary to what you may have thought about power, service is the highest form of leadership. You may have heard that before. It creates a kind of influence that truly powerful people wield, and that kind, it resonates and uplifts. And once anyone in the group chooses to become more powerful, everyone around that person becomes more powerful. And research supports this view. Scientists have found that positive emotions kind of spread from person to person in a work environment, and the spread of positive emotion is associated with improved cooperation, decrease in the conflict, and increased task performance in the workplace. Power can give a leader the potential to influence the group's attitudes or behaviors towards the accomplishment of projects or goals. However, when a leader uses power without sensitivity to the feelings of others, they create authority but little influence. People appreciate leaders who ask them to think rather than just tell them what to do. Effective leaders use power to pull a group together, not push them towards a goal. Leaders rely on influence more than their power from authority. And so influence combines your enthusiasm, excitement, your charisma, your wisdom. When leaders use influence, they appeal to the group's values, skills, knowledge, and kind of helps to motivate them and keep the enthusiasm going so that they can move successfully towards their goals. So this little diagram, it shows some positions. So the lowest level of leadership, the entry level, if you will, is position. So while there's nothing wrong with having a leadership position, everything is wrong with relying only on that position to get people to follow. So that's because it only works if you have leverage, like job security or a paycheck over your followers. At this level, people only follow you if they believe that they have to. So people who remain at this position um, may find it difficult to work with volunteers. Why? Because position does not automatically result in influence, and volunteers are aware they don't have to follow anyone. They truly only follow if they want to. But the news is not all bad at this level. It's a prime place to begin for you to be invest in yourself and your growth as and potential as a leader. So the next level up is based on relationships. At this level, people choose to follow because they want to. In other words, they give the leader permission to lead them. At this level, leaders work on getting to know their people and connecting with them because you can't lead without people. When you like people and treat them as individuals who have value, then you begin to develop a positive influence with them. Trust grows, and that usually leads to respect. And in the environment, it becomes much more positive, whether at home or on the job, at play, even while volunteering. That's where solid, really long lasting relationships are built. The next level is all about getting things done. Um, Leaders who produce results build their influence and credibility. So people still follow because they want to, but they do it because of more than the relationship. People follow these leaders because of their track record. And this is where leaders can really become change agents. Work gets done, morale improves, turnover goes down, goals are achieved, and leading and influencing people becomes kind of fun because when everyone is moving forward together, the team kind of rises to a whole other level of effectiveness. And the goal, of course, with these levels is not just to move from one level to another, excuse me, but to build on the foundation of the others. So the next level is the goal here is to identify and develop as many leaders as you can by investing in them and helping them grow. When there are more leaders, more of the organization's mission can be accomplished, and the people you choose to develop may show great potential for leadership, or they may be diamonds in the rough, but the main idea is the same. If when you invest in them, you can reproduce yourself, clone yourself a little bit. As a result, people will follow you because of what you've done for them personally. And so make investing in leaders a priority and take some intentional steps each day to help them grow. The highest level of leadership is also the most challenging to obtain because it requires some longevity as well as some intentionality, willing to invest your life into the lives of others for the long haul. These leaders kind of create opportunities other leaders don't. They create a legacy in what they do. People follow them because of who they are and what they represent. In other words, they gained a very positive reputation. So just to be aware of some of those levels. Next slide, please. Okay. Let's go over the art of persuasive speech. The information style of public speaking aims to educate, explain, inform your audience about a topic. The goal of an informative speech is for the audience to fully comprehend this knowledge. You're not trying to change their opinions, beliefs, or actions, but rather to provide them with some factual, objective, relevant information. Your main goal is to increase their knowledge and understanding of the subject. So to achieve this, you need to use clear, accurate, and organized language and support your points with credible evidence, examples, and visual aids, and consider your audience because their prior knowledge, interests, and needs may be required to tailor your speech accordingly. Persuasive style of public speaking aims to convince, motivate, or persuade your audience to adopt a certain point of view, attitude, or behavior. You're not just informing them, but also influencing them. You're trying to appeal to their emotions, values, and logic, and to overcome their objections or doubts. The goal of a persuasive speech is to have the audience share a belief or feeling or take an action related to a particular topic. To achieve this, you need to use strong and compelling and engaging language and support your points with still credible evidence, examples, but testimonials that could be included. So include your consider your audience's the demographics, their preferences and biases, and so that you can adapt your speech accordingly. The tone of each type varies. Informative speeches are more neutral and factual, while persuasive speeches are more emotional and opinionated. Evidence also varies. So informative speeches tend to use more data and facts, and persuasive speeches tend to use more anecdotes and stories. So thinking along those ways. Why is persuasive speech hard? It's persuasion is hard, mainly because we have a bias against change. As much as we hear statements like, oh, the only constant is change, or variety is the spice of life, or something like that. The evidence from research and even from our own personal experience show that in reality, we do not like change. So that is why persuasion is an art, the art of gaining fair and favorable consideration of your point of view. Next slide, please. All right, so persuasion urges a choice among some options. Persuaders act as advocates for a cause or point of view and use supporting materials as evidence that justifies that point of view. Persuaded listeners become agents of change. Persuaders ask for the audience to commit to a cause. It also helps to establish your character and your commitment through leadership on this cause. Persuasion appeals to our feelings and makes us confront our obligation to believe or to act in socially and morally responsive ways. But be selective about what you advocate for. Have your ideas reasoned out fully, ahead of time. Hold off maybe advocating strongly for an idea or a service or goal or an organization until you've hashed out all of the potential objections and thoroughly researched it. Early in my career, I made the flub of jumping on a national bandwagon for research and treatment of lead poisoning and the developmental risk for children. And I was embarrassed to learn that Nevada had not gone the direction of other states, and we had almost no exposure to lead poisoning here. Ouch. So being selective will help you directly by making ideas promote themselves and by making you an expert in presenting those ideas, and indirectly build a reputation for yourself as somebody reasonable whose ideas tend to be worth embracing. Avoid overstating your ideas. So obviously avoid exaggeration, both in the points you advocate for and the reasoning behind them, and your degree of belief in them. If you are intending your ideas to be implemented in a particular scope, like within a particular region or demographic, make sure to mention this. A lot of time people object to an idea because it is stated too broadly and they see it or interpret it in a different context, often when you didn't even think of where it is less of a good idea. So listen to and show respect for those who also disagree with you, because of course, obviously, avoid talking as if people who disagree with you are unreasonable or stupid or insulting them in some way. These are people you want to persuade. So you want to form a positive relationship with them, listen to their objections, and find out what is the most intelligent or rational part to their objections. This will help them to feel respected and heard, and that'll make them more likely to listen. And in drawing out rational thinking in them, it will help advance your own ideas, backed by, of course, solid reasoning that you present. Listening to opposing thoughts will also help you refine your ideas and presentation, by understanding how and why people object to them. Be confident and enthusiastic and avoid getting defensive. If you start defending your idea in an argumentative way, it can send the message that you are actually not very confident in the idea. If people already agree with your ideas, but you just have trouble getting them to fully sign on or put energy into them, it may be more helpful to focus on things like the benefits of your idea and impart your energy and your passion and enthusiasm. If people disagree with or feel undecided or ambivalent about your ideas, it may be more valuable to focus on listening to and addressing objections and figuring out a way to build a solid case for your own viewpoint. If you believe things are not fine as they are, then you must argue that there is a need for change. And when you advocate change, you must provide a plan or solution, and the plan tells the audience what you think should be done. Finally, you must defend your plan by explaining its suitability for the circumstances. Let's go to the next slide, Jill. All right, there is such a thing as argumentative persuasion. The goal of persuasion is to get people to agree with you and your point of view on a particular topic. If you're just argumentative, you have a tendency to quarrel or squabble. Someone who is argumentative is always ready to disagree and start arguing with other people. And you may be very accomplished at arguing, as we have all used it at one time or another to get our own way. But there is a positive way to argue. The attitude of argumentative persuasion is simply to get others to consider that you have an idea worthy of listening to. You are sharing a conviction, whether or not your audience ends up agreeing or not. But if you're rigid about what you advocate for or try to persuade others of, you're eventually going to get hung up on pushing something that maybe isn't true or isn't a good idea. But if you hold onto this too strictly, you're going to alienate some people, possibly a lot, depending on what you're holding on to and just how bad or irrational it is. At the same time, don't be afraid to stand your ground. If you're fully considering people's objections and still fully believe in your viewpoint, knowing when to back down or change your viewpoints or when to stand your ground and continue advocating for an unpopular or a minority viewpoint can be tough. But in the long run, it can be very powerful for persuading others. What's manipulative persuasion? A manipulator is defined as somebody controlling somebody or someone, something at their own advantage, often unfairly or even dishonestly. Sometimes the control can be subtle, causing you to question whether it's all in your head. Or other times it can be very aggressive and lead to some fear and trauma. To persuade is to prevail on a person to do something, as by advising or urging, to induce them to believe, by appealing to reason or understanding, to convince them. Manipulate is to manage or influence skillfully, especially in an unfair manner, to adapt or change things to suit one's purpose or advantage. And the major difference is the intent. Persuasion uses logic, good examples, and reasoning to encourage somebody to understand a concept. Gaslighting, on the other hand, is a dishonest attempt to make someone believe something that's not true for the perpetrator's own benefit. Another form of manipulation, a straw man argument, is the logical fallacy of distorting an opposing position to an extreme version of itself and then arguing against that extreme version. So what are the red flags of a manipulator? They make you feel guilty for everything you do. They back up their reasons as well to make you believe they are right. The aim is to make you go in a direction or do something you wouldn't normally or would actively resist. So what can you do to deflect those manipulative tactics? For example, if they belittle or talk down to you, try saying something like this. I hear what you're saying. However, I feel differently about this and would appreciate you respecting my opinion. Um, if somebody accuses you of being manipulative, pause before responding. Examine your own behavior. You may not have had malicious intent, but you might have been using your power in a relationship to gain something you want. Manipulation is more prevalent in our everyday conversations than we realize. And so you may encounter that. Next slide, please. Okay. Everyone has made an argument. If you've ever persuaded your parents to let you out of the house late or convinced your teacher to raise your grade, you already know the basics of building an argument. Understanding how to present an argument is a very versatile skill. An argument is an act of expressing a point of view on a subject and supporting that view using evidence such as research, statistics, or examples. By presenting a sensible argument, professionals can persuade an audience and usher them towards developing a certain perspective. And for an argument to be persuasive, it tends to follow an organizational format that an audience can follow and discern with ease. There are a few fundamental steps that I'd like to just share, take into structuring an argument. There are 5 steps. And the first one is to introduce the problem or issue at the center of your argument. In your introduction, provide any relevant background information or context that may enable your audience to understand your argument. At this point, you may also provide a basic outline of the evidence you plan to present. Focus on a single powerful idea. If you can see 20 reasons why you're right, it's tempting to put all of them in your argument because it feels like the sheer weight of 20 reasons will be much more persuasive than just focusing on 1 or 2. Yet from the outside, an argument with endless different reasons is much less persuasive than one that's focused and precision on a small number of reasons. The second step is to present your claim or your thesis statement. This portion of your argument offers your perspective on the issue. Your claim should be concise, direct, easily intelligible by your audience. Every argument does rest on assumptions. Some of these assumptions are so obvious you're not even going to be aware you're making them. You think you are right in your argument, you should be able to assemble a good amount of evidence that you're right. The next step is to convince your audience of your claim. So you need to provide some evidence that supports it. So present examples, research stats, studies, other information that proves your claim and fosters a sense of validity. While supporting your claim, try to focus on offering facts rather than anecdotal information. What happens if you can't find any evidence for your argument? The first thing you should probably consider is whether or not you might be wrong. If you find lots of evidence against your position and minimal evidence for it, it would be logical to maybe change your mind. But if you're struggling to find evidence either way, it may simply be that the area is under-researched. Prove what you can, including your assumptions, and work from there. So far we've talked about constructing an informative argument, trying to make it solid and hard to challenge. But from this point on, we're going to focus on what it takes to make an argument persuasive. One thing you can do is to choose your evidence with your audience in mind. Try to acknowledge the opposing side of your argument. You may explain why you disagree with counterclaims, disprove their validity, how valid they are, and concede to them within certain contexts. But addressing opposing perspectives will help you maintain objectivity and add credibility to your argument overall. You can't construct a compelling argument unless you understand why somebody might think you are wrong. And you need to come up with reasons other than them being mistaken or stupid or something like that. After all, we almost always target the same end goals. yet we come to divergent conclusions. While most people see that these things have some value, different political persuasions value them at different degrees, and lifespan respite lives in a political arena. The fifth one is to draw conclusions about your claim. Restate it and briefly summarize the evidence you presented. And in your conclusion, you may present an appeal to the audience, their emotions or perspective that help to persuade them further. For example, you may explain how the issue personally affects your audience. To demonstrate your argument's importance, think of the last time you changed your mind about something really important. Perhaps to preserve our pride, we frequently forget that we ever believe something different. Your argument needs to avoid vilifying people who have maybe only recently come around to your point of view. Instead, to be truly persuasive, you should welcome them. Everyone is operating from their own level of understanding and awareness. Who the person is, their beliefs, their conditioning will influence their receptivity to arguments. The ability to influence often rests on your credibility. If you want people to believe you, briefly acknowledge their concerns. Say, I understand that, or we recognize this, but, and then share one or two positive outcome cases or instances. People may still have issues with facets of your positive cases, but keep a list of them so that you can share them when you need them, and select the cases that will best resonate with your audience. If you feel that your opinion is obviously right, it's hard work even to understand why people might disagree. Some people reach this point and don't bother to try, instead concluding that those who disagree with them just don't get it. So here's some tips to help you refine your persuasive argument. And I've got this little exercise. Remember that when we have a list of items, we tend to remember the first items on the list and the last items on the list. And we have difficulty remembering the items in the middle. So think of the alphabet and answer these questions in your mind. What's the first letter of the alphabet? What's the last letter of the alphabet? What's the third letter? What's the 16th letter? Most of us can answer the first questions very quickly, but we'll struggle on the 16th letter, which is P, by the way. Why is that? Because after all, we know the whole alphabet, but we have trouble recalling the items in the middle of the list. And there's also something called priming, where we tend to align our beliefs with something about with how that thing actually is. Have you ever met a person that maybe a good friend of yours said was a bad person, and what did you think of them? A lot of times we have difficulty feeling different about them because we've already been primed not to like them. So from marketing strategies to political campaigns, priming plays a crucial role in shaping our thoughts and actions. So now let's apply these principles to persuasion. If I have 3 arguments to support my claim, here's how I would order them. Number 1, the best argument. Number 2, of those 3 arguments, the worst one. And number 3, the second best argument. I order them that way because the listener will be more likely to remember our first argument. Like their attentions will be the highest there. And the last argument, because this was the most recent one they heard. And if you put the strongest argument first, it primes the listener into thinking that all of your arguments are good. They heard the first argument, and if they were impressed by it, it will influence how they think about your other arguments. So start with your strongest argument and end with your second strongest, and everything in the middle is up to you. Next slide, please.
Did you want to do a polling question here, Cheryl, first?
I'm gonna do that in just a little bit. Is that okay?
Okay,
So
this is the slide.
let's get through this one here pretty quick because I'm watching the time. The goal of argumentative speech is to get the listener to acknowledge that your side is valid and deserves consideration as another point of view. In comparison, the goal of persuasive writing is to get the person to agree with you and your point of view on a particular topic. Generally, both forms offer relevant reasons, credible facts, and sufficient evidence to support the argument, and that it is valid and worthy. But persuasive speech blends facts and emotions in an attempt to convince the listener that you're right. To start an argumentative statement, you must first research the topic and then align with one side of the argument. With persuasive statements, you identify a topic and take a side on it. You're already convinced. The viewpoints in argumentative speech do acknowledge that opposing views exist, but gives you the opportunity to counter these views, tactfully, in order to show why you feel that your own view is the more worthy one to hold. In persuasive writing, you are single-minded based on a personal conviction that a particular way of thinking is the only sensible way to think. You present one side, and if you include any opposing view, choose only one, and then deal with it quickly to dismiss or refute it. Argumentative speech doesn't need an audience to convince. You're content with simply putting it out there. But persuasive speech needs an audience, the intended audience, knowing what they think and believe and attempting to sway them to your side. Argumentative writing and speech simply get someone to consider you have an idea worthy of listening to. You are sharing a conviction, whether or not your audience ends up agreeing. But the attitude of persuasive writing is to gain kind of like another vote. So it's a little more aggressive in going after the audience. Persuasive speech is more personal, more passionate, more emotional. So let's do our polling question here. So I got a question regarding the national strategy. Asking you, have you prepared a good argument for the priority that you have selected? Have you, one, not taken a position on any national strategy recommendations? Two, selected a national strategy priority and have taken a position on the issue? Three, started gathering the evidence or reasons or claims that support your position as well as those against it? Four, prepared your strongest evidence, reasons, and claims for your argument and are prepared to defend your position. And then five is that you have developed an argument that addresses different perspectives and is applicable in a broader context. Part of our report to ACL will need maybe your arguments for the direction you have taken on the national strategy priorities. So helping you to gather that information as you provide your updates for the matrix, think about the arguments that you prepared or that you can prepare for that. Where are we on did you do the polling question or could you not pull it up?
No, it's up there.
People, are you seeing it? Are you? They're voting.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. Okay. Somehow I had pulled it apart, so I apologize. Okay, so we've got 38 still working on a priority or a position on a priority. Oh, all right. Give a few more people a chance to respond. We've got some of the words cut off, so I hope that doesn't make it difficult. I always forget to make these short statements. Okay.
Some people might be able to expand the window on their computer to see it all, I hope.
Let me try that. Yeah, okay, you can stretch it a little bit. Okay, that'll help. Okay. All right, 45% of you have not taken a position on a national strategy recommendation. 25% have. 20% are gathering some evidence. 3 know that they've got their strongest evidence gathered and are ready to, oh wait, are we still going? Maybe we got a few more that are coming on here.
No, when you started going over them, I closed the poll.
Okay, all right. It just one of them jumped. Sorry. So we're not quite feeling comfortable that we've got arguments pulled together on why we've selected certain recommendations and pulled that together, but that's helpful. I hope that this presentation will help on getting you closer to that because you're going to be talking to people about it, even in your organization or in your community, in your state. So thank you. Okay. All right. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about difficult conversations. Developing a plan for handling difficult conversations will help you kind of stay in control of the situation. And this will give you the power to keep your cool and respond appropriately instead of letting others take over. With very controversial topics or difficult audiences, set modest goals. You may not change anyone's mind, but ask only for a fair hearing from the audience. Give a more of a multi-sided presentation and acknowledge the arguments on the other side. Show respect at all times for the opposition. But to start a multi-sided argument, start by saying, I know many of you may not like to hear what I'm saying, but I hope you will still listen and think about it. Maybe you can contrast or create a contrast by comparing the results to a worst case alternative or compare it to another solution that could be effective, but then show how these two approaches are different and justify why you've selected one approach over the other. We hope that in our discussion groups, as we break into those, that it will allow you to discuss and share how you've dealt with some difficult arguments. So let's go to our next slide, Jill. Now, we're going to break up into some groups, and as you get in your groups, we've got a facilitator that should be in each one of them. And we're going to ask them not to forget to hit the record on their session. But here's the questions for our discussion today. And hopefully to have you share an example from Lifespan Respite, your activities that you use persuasion and use that to move forward or accomplish a task. And then the question, have you used persuasion to convince somebody to do something positive or helpful? And then how would you react in those difficult situations when maybe somebody's trying to call you manipulative or has a different take on an issue? And how would you respond so that they're more accepting of your message? So we're going to split into our various groups, if that's okay.
Hello.
All right, are we in a group now? Well, I'm going to hit the record button. We're going to just make sure we don't have.
Not in a group.
No. Yeah.
No.